Hey you, welcome back to a Ghostly Encounter Live, where we're going to do ghost stories with the ghost guides, and I'm Renee, your typical ghost guide, and next to me here is, I did it the wrong way, is
Dusty, your atypical ghost guide, I guess.
Atypical ghost guide.
That's the right word, isn't it? Atypical?
It makes me think of Beetleborgs. I hope people know what that is, or I'm just showing my age.
I don't.
You don't know what the Beetleborgs are?
No.
It was like the Power Rangers, except they fought monsters. Anyway, we'll talk about the Beetleborgs later.
Wait, so what did the Power Rangers fight?
The Power Rangers, I don't know, they started fighting dinosaurs and things got weird, but
all right.
Yeah, I don't know why I said hey you. Somebody needs to make that a meme. Hey Roger!
Roger!
So
Roger, you have a stereotypical horror movie name, I think. I mean, if you Roger Scarberry, remember from Mothman, and then Roger Perrin, from like The Conjuring, so
yeah.
Roger, you should have your own horror movie. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. We are gonna talk about Gina.
Hi, Miss Gina.
We're gonna talk about a couple of different spooky things tonight. We're gonna be talking about the Amityville Horror. We're gonna be talking about my story, which I already forgot. Oh yeah, the Black Dahlia. I was like, I always do this where I'm like, what am I talking about? Right, I'm talking about the Black Dahlia tonight, and we're gonna get into
what I'm talking about, but not what you're talking about.
I know, until I actually have to talk about it. And we're gonna get into all that in a few. But if you guys want to share this now, so that your friends know that we're live and they can watch us too, that'd be great. Give us a like. We do this every Tuesday and Friday at 8 o'clock. So
also, I know I interrupted you, but you were talking about Roger's page.
Yes. Oh, correct. Roger has a really great page. It's called Haunted World, I believe. Let me just get that correct before I spill some wrong tea. That's what people call it nowadays, right? Tea. And it's a haunted page pretty much where you can put all of your personal hauntings and experiences, haunted photos and whatnot. And if you guys could totally go ahead and like his page, it's super cool. I think it's called Haunted World. Yell at me in the comments if that's wrong, Roger, please. Now, we're going to be talking about our Haunted Happenings segment, my favorite segment. This is all your personal experiences, so you can totally send in your personal experiences, your personal hauntings at any time, and we will add them to our little roster so that we can talk about it on the show. Our first haunted happening is coming in from Anthony C. He had sent this to me about a week or two back, and it has some really cool photos involved in it, but we'll get to that in a minute. And this house we've actually talked about on the stream before. If you go a couple episodes back, we had a haunted happenings person send in something about like a guy that would stand in between her bathroom and her bedroom, and a little boy in a green shirt and a red hat. It was like Brianna, her name was. Well, this is her father, and he sent in some of his own personal experiences from that house. So Anthony C. says, several things happened in the basement with several witnesses. One night around midnight, I was down there talking on the CB radio, and I heard Malachi on his scooter riding around down the other end of the basement. So I went upstairs to tell my ex-wife Denise to get him in bed. He had already been asleep for a couple of hours, however. So the scooter, so to speak, was riding itself. Another night, a friend of mine was down there with me, and I was working on his radio. We saw a pair of pliers float off my workbench in front of both of us and slam down. Another night, I was having dinner with a friend, and Jimmy Diller was meeting me at the house. Jimmy watches once in a while, so hi, Jimmy, if you're watching. It was rainy, and I told him where the spare key was. But when I got home, all the lights inside were on, and he was hanging out outside. I asked him why, and he said that when he went in the house and grabbed a drink from the fridge, the basement door started banging and shaking violently. So he ran outside, which is something I would do.
Yep, I think I have before.
When Denise's dad came from San Diego to visit, something slapped him and left a hand mark on his back. Wow. Poppy and the kids. Poppy's my grandfather. Poppy and the kids would see things all the time. I have pictures I will send in the fireplace. The ghost hunters from TV wanted to investigate the house, but the owners refused. So Jim's going to pull those photos up for us to look at here. I remember the ghost hunters had gotten in contact with him. He had been messaging them, like emailing them for a while, but nothing ever came of it. So in this photo here on the bottom right-hand side, you can see what looks like a little man wearing a hat showing up in the flames. This would happen all the time with his fireplace. I think when we did, or he did research, I didn't do research, but he had done like some digging and some research, and he found that the house had like a really bad fire in the 1930s. And then we also found that a little boy got hit by a bus in the 1950s on that like same street. And so he thinks that they were in his house. The next photo down, you see a profile of somebody's face in that right corner. Yeah. And then the next photo down, you see another profile of somebody's face. It looks like they have like high cheeks and look a little pouty lip, like they're going to Fashion Week, but they got a little bit of a double chin. So yeah, cool photos, Anthony. He had some other really cool ones. Maybe if I get permission from him, I can post them on the page sometime. So moving on to our next haunted happening, we have, the suspense is killing you, I know, Jesse H., who says, my scariest experience had to be witnessing a triangular UFO. It appeared above my head and abducted me as I was walking along the train tracks at night. It caused me to get hit by a train and almost die. Hi, Jennifer. Hi, Addison. Hi, Grandma.
Okay, you can't.
Hi,
I'm
Gabby.
Sorry. That was so anticlimactic. You just
Sorry.
caused me to get hit by a train and almost die. Oh my god, hi.
I know. Anyway, Jesse says, it messed me up. I live with it every day. I snapped my left arm. It broke like a twig, and my collarbone was fractured. It broke my neck, literally, and punctured my lungs. I had x-rays done, and there's an implant in my left hand. Ooh. I have seen over 1,000 UFOs in my life and 3 very close encounters. You know, this is kind of weird with the implant thing. I hear this a lot. And I read a story not too long ago about this woman that claimed she was abducted too, and there was over 36 witnesses that watched her body floating along. This was in like Chicago. This happened like years ago. And she kept saying to her sister, I feel like there's something in my nose. I feel like there's something in my nose. And when she went to the doctor, there was like this little like weird, it looked like a horizontal black opaque object in her nose, and they didn't know what it was. And then like 3 months later, she got abducted again, and she went back to the doctor, and lo and behold, the implant, the thing that was in her nose, was gone. So super creepy. The thing with UFOs is I feel like there's so many people in the world that discredit alien sightings and UFO sightings that it's sort of like seeing is believing, you know. It's, I hear, is there like geese attacking you?
Yeah, those are geese. Sorry.
Tell them they're interrupting our stream.
I'm not about to fight a goose.
Now, our next haunted happening comes from Olivia C. And Olivia says, my worst 2 paranormal experiences are when I started to experience sleep paralysis. This is something interesting that maybe we'll talk about on a different stream entirely. But she says, I didn't understand it. I was only 16. I ended up running out of my grandmother's house around 5:30 a.m. I sat on the swing and I immediately called my aunt, who was a medium, and I started to cry to her about what happened. The weird part is that as I was waking up from it, my right leg was draped off of the edge of the bed, and it scared me more than the actual sleep paralysis episode itself. So this is sleep paralysis that, for those that don't know, is kind of the out of body experience. It's when, I really don't know how to describe it, to be honest. I've only had like 2 or 3 episodes of sleep paralysis. But scientifically, they believe that your eyes are flickering, and so you're seeing some of your room, and your brain is kind of in the dream aspect at the same time. And while sometimes you can have like really great sleep paralysis where maybe you're like, I don't know, at Disney World. Disney World's now in your bedroom or whatnot. Sometimes, and more typically, you have really bad sleep paralysis, and you can see demons, and a lot of spiritual people believe that you're seeing another dimension almost. And so there's no real way to understand or know what's going on. Oh man, I fell. Um, so yeah, that's sleep paralysis. It's really freaky. I'll go ahead and let Dusty take over. Dusty, let's go into our first story. Tell them what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Yeah, a ghost knocked over my camera. Sorry.
Totally, it wasn't a goose.
Goose. See, the goose got mad, and it was the ghost of his fellow goose.
It's for talking smack.
I know. See, I'm going to be talking about the Amityville Horror a little bit, and we're not talking like Ryan Reynolds movie, though I do enjoy that movie. But yeah, and we're all set because I turned the porch light on, so hopefully there won't be.
Great, you won't have to bother your poor mother this time.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so it's November 13th, 1974, in Long Island, New York. Of course, I mean, it's such a famous story that you probably know the basics, but I'm gonna kind of a ghost of a goose. I'm gonna talk about it anyway. Ronald DeFeo Jr. was about 23, I think, at the time, murdered his entire family while they were asleep. So he had a .35 caliber rifle, and he shot him in the head while they were sleeping. And that was his parents and his 4 siblings. You all right?
Yeah, there's something blinking behind me, but I think it's just my microwave. There's not the Men in Black aren't in my house. I have not.
Are you sure?
Abducted yet?
Not yet, but you were talking about him. So, yeah. So he shot his parents and his 4 siblings. Now it's funny because, well, I mean, it's not funny, but he was actually supposedly at a bar beforehand. I think he had a bit of an alcohol problem, a drinking problem.
A whole lot of problems: alcohol, heroin, LSD, shrooms. He had a bunch of problems.
Yeah. Well, he ended up after he did all of that, he actually ran back to the bar, and he was yelling, "My family's been shot, my family's dead," and he tried to claim innocence and act like he wasn't the one that did it at first. And then they went to the house, and they discovered that there was no sign of any kind of struggle or break-in or anything. It didn't look like anybody had fought back or whatever, so it couldn't have been anybody that broke in. And they eventually kind of ruled all that out and took him into custody.
Makes sense.
Yeah, his attorney tried to, because there's one story that Ronald DeFeo was hearing voices and seeing things that told him to do it. So his attorney tried to get him to plead insanity. However, jury ruled that he knew it was wrong while he was doing it, and it went against the legal definition of insane. So he actually ended up getting 6 25 to life sentences, and is still in the New York Correctional Facility. For anybody that's about as good at math as I am, that's 150 years.
Thank you. That would have taken me all night to figure out, because I'm not good at math.
I think I did that math like 2 days ago, so hopefully it's still right. Yeah, but anyway, so we're going to fast forward now to a year and a month later. And the house was bought by the Lutz family at a significantly reduced price, which would have been $80,000.
Woo, that's a sale.
That's probably why they took it. Yeah, but they actually only lasted about 28 days before they left.
That's less than a month, unless it's February.
It's not February, so yeah, it was less than a month. Anyway, yeah, they lasted 28 days before they fled, claiming that it was haunted. So, and this is where we get to, people wanting to come in and look at their house, investigations, some of the things that they claimed were happening. All right. So the stepfather, George Lutz, apparently actually dabbled in the occult a bit. So that's kind of like not a good start to anything. I think it kind of makes you question a lot of things that we'll get to that later. But so yeah, he dabbled in the occult, and he also claims that he woke up at 3:15 in the morning every single morning, which is the exact same time that Ronnie supposedly killed his, not supposedly, Ronnie did kill his family. So 3:15 in the morning is when Ronnie killed his family, and he woke up every single morning at that time. And the family claimed to smell a lot of what?
Roger said something funny.
Oh, I missed it. Oh, this house isn't
I
haunted.
don't
No.
have a knife.
I don't have a gun. We don't have a gun, mister. Anyway, the family claimed, I keep getting distracted, I'm sorry. The family claimed to smell strange odors. They even saw green slime oozing from the walls and the keyholes. It's a little weird, I don't know. But they also felt a lot of cold spots around the house, especially around the staircase.
That's pretty typical.
Random cold spots, yeah. Now, there was also a priest that they had come and bless the house when they first moved in. Not that they were there very long anyway, but they had a priest come in and bless the house. And apparently in the upstairs bedroom, one of the upstairs bedrooms, he heard a voice yell, "Get out." He, had a really weird experience, a weird feeling. And he told them not to sleep in that bedroom upstairs. I think they intended on making it a sewing room anyway. So they're like, yeah, it's all right. We're not going to sleep in
Okay.
Now they had a garage door that kept opening and closing. Apparently there was a knife that got knocked off of the counter in the kitchen. Like knocked off the counter, like somebody
like a ghost
knocked it off the counter, yeah. And this is interesting too. Apparently there was a pig-like creature with red eyes staring at George and his son from a window more than once. So yeah, pig creature.
Okay, this is not good. So maybe next stream I'll talk about Pigman, because
Men Bear Pig.
Pigman, he's a legend. I don't know if y'all have ever read the Weird New Jersey articles, but Pigman is a legend in some part of northern New Jersey, and he's related to occult stuff. Apparently somebody killed a man and they sacrificed him, and they also sacrificed a pig in the same circle, and that they created Pigman. And there's more to it. I might be butchering that. I haven't done a whole lot of research on how Pigman came about, but he is supposed to be a demonic entity, and so that's pretty significant.
All right.
Sorry.
No, that makes a lot more sense, I think, when you actually go and explain it like that. Otherwise, there's just a weird demonic pig staring at you.
People call me that a lot.
Oh my God, Renee. Oh my God, I need to. Okay, yeah. So, things like Kathy, which is the wife/mother, levitating off the beds, and the kids levitating off the beds. A room full of flies that I guess kept tormenting them. There we go. And
gross.
Yeah, one of the sons, Christopher, even insists that he was possessed for a while by
demonic pig.
I know, I'm not going to comment on demonic. I'm not going to call you demonic pig ever.
Oh.
Anyway, because Christopher insists that he was possessed by something demonic at one point. Hopefully not a pig. Can you imagine?
Oh, you froze. Can I imagine pig? What?
Yeah, can you imagine being possessed by a demonic pig? What would that be like?
You would not like bacon.
Oh my God. Is that the only thing? You wouldn't like bacon.
You would not be a fan of BLTs.
Oh. Okay, so there's something interesting. Apparently, at one point, I read somewhere at one point that, and I think this is mentioned in the movie, that it was a site of enclosure for the sick, mad, and dying, operated by the Shinnecock Indian Nation. But I didn't see too much on that, so I'm not gonna, get too deep on that. However, I do know that the guy that they talked about in the movie was made up for the movie. The doctor guy that apparently tormented them. Yeah, but they did mention that there was a lot of things took a toll on them. Of course, the hauntings took a toll on them as a family, and they went through a lot of personality changes. They became, angry, distant, kind of like that. It was a strain on all of their relationships. So they claimed they saw shadowy figures. Apparently, one of the kids actually got thrown up the staircase.
Go to your room. Oh man.
So you got thrown.
George Klutz. I'll leave. It's fine. I know. It was a bad joke. I know. George Klutz. Get it, George Lutz. Anyway, continue.
Anyway, okay. Anyway, yeah. So Danny Lutz was one of the sons, claimed that it had nothing to do with the DeFeos. So there was no. I really hope that you could hear the crickets in the background when that happened. Anyway,
I could.
had nothing to do with the DeFeos, but actually that George had summoned bad spirits with his occult dabblings. It was things that he summoned, which makes a little bit of sense to me, and I can get into that later also. But apparently he also wasn't a very good stepfather. I don't know if he's summoning demon pigs, maybe not.
Yeah, I was gonna say if he's making your bed levitate and summoning demon pigs, I would assume he's not getting a number one dad cup at the end of the year.
Yeah, maybe not. But but yeah, and they could hear people walking around upstairs, even though nobody was upstairs, which sounds kind of like a typical thing, you know. So that then they actually do have a brief account of what happened on the last night they were there. And they didn't actually run away the last night. They left the next morning after that happened, and they all kind of gathered and recounted what they experienced. And now this is kind of what it is. Kathy apparently began to lift off the bed and slide away from the bed and slide away from George. And then apparently George said that something else got into bed with them, that he could feel something getting. Why are you laughing now?
That's not savory for the live stream. I won't say anything else. Anyway.
All right. Continue. And then anyway, and they we should kick her off of the live stream. Anyway, so yeah, the kids' beds were slamming up and down all night and being dragged across the floor. Pigeons. There were pigeons. They could hear pigeons on the AC top all night, even though there were no signs of pigeons. I'm sorry, no signs of pigeons or anything the next morning. The lights were flickering on and off. They actually also had their dog next to them all night. They tied him up in their room, and the dog was up all night, going in circles and circles and throwing up all night.
Gross.
And yeah, and the next day is when they fled, which was January 14th, 1976. And apparently they only took about listen to Roger. They only took about three pairs of clothes apiece. And they didn't even grab their belongings or anything. They just kind of packed real quick and left. And after they fled, they actually contacted very famous people that we've probably heard of at some point.
I love them.
Ed and Lorraine Warren, yeah. So Ed and Lorraine Warren did take this case. They did, yeah. They took this case. And it was February 24th, 1976, when they did the investigation. So here's some stuff that happened during the investigation. Lorraine actually described an overwhelming sadness and depression throughout the entire house. And Ed felt a powerful, what he said, inhuman presence in the basement. And it was as if standing underneath a waterfall and the pressure was driving me down to the floor, is what he said. Yeah, so they actually ended up concluding that it wasn't a ghost and that this was no ordinary house, haunted house. So by that, I don't mean they said it wasn't haunted. They just mean it wasn't a human spirit that was haunting.
It wasn't a ghost. It was an entity. There's a big difference between ghosts and entities. Like, an entity is kind of a generalism. Like, it can be kind of ghosts, demons, or Wendigos, whatever, mixed in. But a ghost is typically a human spirit. So.
Yeah. So they were claiming that it wasn't human. And that this was no ordinary haunted house. The Warrens put together a group of professional psychics to assist in their findings, and they did a full-on, investigation. That was kind of just a walkthrough they did. Now they had investigation with a bunch of other professional people as well. Even the Channel 5 news crew, the Channel 5 news crew team, they covered the investigation. So they were there, and this was March 6th, 1976. Now, Mary Pascarea, I'm going to say is her name, is one of the psychics that was there, and she's considered a time walker. And I guess what this is it can kind of sense or visualize events that happened.
It's kind of like a psychic, but for the past.
Yeah, it happened in the past. So she's called a time walker. She took a walk around the house and outside the house as well, and she was saying a bunch of prayers, and she got to the Our Father prayer, and then she actually saw a group of figures that was also saying the Our Father prayer but backwards.
Ooh.
So
Ooh, that's not good.
Yeah,
No.
anything backwards is never good, right? No.
Nope.
What if they spoke pig Latin?
Some loud geese in the background.
Those are not geese, those are children. I apologize.
Oh.
I can't tell them to go away either. Anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. So
just get
anyway,
the demonic pig on them. Anyway, was anything else you had to say about it?
Of course. One of the cameraman actually apparently suffered heart palpitations and shortness of breath while climbing the stairs. I mean, this kind of sounds like me every time I climb stairs.
Same.
But yeah,
okay.
maybe he was a fit dude. I don't know. But then they
healthy cameraman.
They also felt a bunch of cold spots around the stairs that night as well. Funny enough, this staircase is a really creepy staircase. It's a picture I want Jim to go ahead and pull up, if you don't mind. It's a very famous photo of Amityville from the investigations.
Yeah.
Really creepy. I don't know. Again, I don't like children things when it comes to hauntings.
Me either.
Yeah, but that's
it might not be.
No, but yeah, so this is, I guess, what they suspected to be one of the DeFeo boys, but there were no children in the house at the time of the investigation at all. So there's like a little boy just peeking around that door there, around the staircase. This is not a staircase I want to walk up. I mean, I don't like walking up a lot of staircases anyway.
Also, they compared a picture of him to the youngest DeFeo boy, and they look almost exactly alike, wearing the same clothes that the DeFeo boy was wearing on the last night that he died.
You can see what he's wearing?
Alive. Yeah, well, I guess in this photo you can kind of see what he's wearing behind the staircase. It's kind of just black, but it looks like a flowing-ish shirt, perhaps a pajama top. I'm coughing, sorry. I'm dying. I swear, I think I just swallowed a bug. I'm not sick. Anyway, both are gross though. Yeah, so they think it's the youngest, like the DeFeo boy that was shot, and I think he was maybe something like 10 or 11 years old when he died.
Either way, he's not supposed to be there. That's all I know.
No, no, he's not. He's supposed to be dead.
But that's just a cool photo from the investigation. Now, they did some seances, and during the first seance, Mary actually became ill and apparently had to be escorted out of the room. And she mentioned that she felt like there was a threatening black shadow, and I agree. But yeah, there's a threatening black shadow, and it kind of formed a head, is what it said, and that she felt personally threatened by it. But yeah, she had to leave the room. Alberta Riley was another one of the psychics, and she claimed that, here it is, it's upstairs in the bedroom, which is interesting given what the priest had said before,
Yeah.
Not to sleep in that bedroom. And they always hear people walking around upstairs. Maybe there's something in that bedroom. Maybe they shouldn't, go in there.
Yeah, that's really important information.
Right, yeah. That's important. Anyway, the Warrens ended up declaring that it was negative and had never been human nature before. So, they declared it was, and it never really says demon here, but they did declare it was not human, and they concluded that after the full investigation as well, and that it actually could move freely on its own will and doesn't have to stay here, but it was kind of like a resting place, which kind of makes sense if you go in. You think about George, and his occult practices, it would kind of make sense. And the fact that it can leave on its own free will also definitely, you have to assume it's not a human spirit that's attached to that location. And they said the only way to get rid of it was through a cleansing by an Anglican exorcist or a Roman Catholic priest. And the Luxes said no. They said no, it's too much of a responsibility, and they wouldn't feel right putting the Warrens' lives in danger. So they ended up just giving the house back to the Columbia Savings and Loan on August 30th, 1976. And that's the end of the Lutzes in the house. It has been owned by several other families since as well.
Okay. So, as for hauntings, I know this is something you and I have talked about, and I know there has been controversy involved in the case, but Ed and Lorraine Warren, they're the most famous paranormal investigation. Well, they're both deceased now, but they were in like the entire world, and they went ahead and said, that it was haunted, that there's definitely something going on there, and that perhaps yes, it was connected to George Lutz. But I know that a lot of people say that they have lived there and that they haven't experienced any hauntings, and there was a little bit of conspiracy with the lawyer. Do you want to touch upon that?
Sure. Yeah, this is one of the most controversial cases, I think, haunting
Yeah.
wise, that, has come across. And I think that it was a big legal deal too. And everybody thinks, because the Lutzes were struggling financially, so people do think that they just wanted money from publicity and everything. And here's what I think. I think it was really haunted. And even the Lutzes, for the rest of their lives, would claim that it was haunted. They never denied that it was haunted. However,
Right.
the attorney it was Ronnie DeFeo's attorney as well. Actually, he's the one that wanted to insist Ronnie was insane and tried to blame Ronnie's father for being abusive and everything. But after, Ronnie got convicted, he never actually reaffirmed his innocence. So he didn't even, believe in what he was saying. But he did he did mention that he was getting more from the publicity of this case than the case itself. And I think he kind of liked being in that spotlight there. So when the Lutzes, he was hearing about the Lutzes story about, about the claims of it being haunted and everything, he saw an opportunity to take it and bring it back into the spotlight and put himself, there as well. So he became their attorney. So it is the same man, William Weber, who was their attorney as well. And he had a falling out with the Lutzes over kind of a book deal. So there was an author, Anson, he did write a book about it, and he wanted to cut a book deal. And Weber wanted them to do it. He wanted to go in on it with them, but he also wanted to share the royalties with Ronnie DeFeo. And George was basically like, so you basically want to pay him for the murders. And they weren't okay with that. And they eventually cut him out of the book deal and kind of cut ties with him, didn't really keep talking to Weber. And Weber was a little sore, I think. And he came out and he did say that they claimed it was haunted, but that eventually they embellished it over a bottle of wine.
Yeah, but here's the thing. With movies and books that you're reading about the paranormal, and even TV shows you see on TV, you have to know that, yes, 90% of the evidence that they show you and they talk about probably is true, but the other 10% is all flavoring. It's all embellishment to make it more meatier.
Absolutely.
Even like the haunting in Connecticut, we'll have to save that for a live stream too. That's a good one. The whole scene in The Haunting in Connecticut where she was mopping and her water turned to blood and where hundreds of bodies were falling out of the walls of her house. She even said that didn't actually happen, that she thought for a moment that her water had turned red into blood, that it could have been a delusion of her mind, and that when she found bones in her, like, what is that, drywall, that it was only a couple of bones. It wasn't like hundreds and hundreds of bodies. So there's some flavoring added to make it a more interesting and frightening story, to be quite frank. But usually there's a lot of truth to what's being said. Okay, Dusty.
Well, all I have to say is the rest. Of course, you have the hauntings. They're always embellished. But this one, even before it became a book and movie, and that's what they were saying. And George Lutz eventually did come out and say, this is way on before, after Kathy died, this is decades later, he did claim that they embellished a little bit. And it was like the green slime, they embellished green slime. That wasn't really a thing. But that
nobody
it
really
was
expected
haunted.
that to be
even
real either.
The sons always claimed that the house ruined their lives and that they still have nightmares, that it was haunted. And the Lutzes, they held on to it the whole time. They never denied it was haunted. They embellished a little bit, but at the same time, and after he said that, he just lost credibility. So, nobody believed him anymore. And the future owners of the homes did say that of the home never had experiences apparently after that. So it also kind of took away a little bit of credibility. George and Kathy Lutz actually did a lie detector test, which I know isn't always 100%, but they did pass. But I think that because George dabbled in the occult, that maybe it's not the house that's haunted, maybe it was George whatever he did. So it's possible that future owners never experienced anything,
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. Do you have anything else? Oh, okay. Well, we're going to move on to our next story of the night, which is going to be the Black Dahlia. So, the Black Dahlia, I know, is a super popular story. I know there's been hundreds of shows, hundreds of movies on it, hundreds of books written on it. Who's the killer? Do we think this person is the killer? This person might be the killer. But I'm going to give you what I think, and I'm going to give you the facts behind it. And yeah, we're going to talk about her spirit, too. There is a ghost sighting involved with this story, so hang tight for that. Now, on January 15th, 1947, Betty Bessinger was walking with her 3-year-old daughter in Leimert Park, Los Angeles, California, when they saw what Betty thought was a discarded mannequin. So she just saw this mannequin kind of tossed in pieces all over the grass, and she kept walking with her young daughter. And as she approached the mannequin, she quickly realized that it wasn't a mannequin at all, and that it was a mutilated corpse of a young and naked woman. So, of course, naturally, she calls the police. And the police arrive. They find the body of a young woman lying near the sidewalk who had been sliced cleanly in half, like completely in half, and her face had been cut in a very deep Glasgow smile or Cheshire smile, sort of like what the Joker has going on, if you don't know what that is. Now, we are not going to show the pictures of her mutilated corpse, obviously, because this is for all families, and we don't really want to show you a mutilated corpse on this stream. So if you're a freak and you want to look it up, like I had to look it up because I was doing research, be my guest. I mean,
she was also naked, wasn't she?
Yeah, very naked. Anyway, so the blood from her body had also been drained completely. She was completely pale. It was determined that she had been dead for at least 10 hours before her killer tossed her out on the side of the street like garbage. She had several slices, deep slices on her breasts, on her thighs. Her intestines had been neatly removed and then tucked under her pelvis. So
how do you neatly remove somebody's intestines?
Keep that in mind. We're going to talk about that. How would you neatly, if you were a serial killer right now, right?
Okay.
And you were going to kill me.
Don't tell my secret.
Oh.
I'm kidding.
Dusty Winters, serial killer. How would you neatly remove my intestines? Probably you wouldn't be neatly removing anything from my body unless you were a doctor. Maybe you were practicing, right? And that's one of the theories we'll get to in a second.
Okay. Well, I'm not, so.
Also, though, it was kind of creepy because whoever killed her posed her body as if she were modeling. So her hands were like above her head and her knees were bent and then slightly spread apart. So like she was in like a model-esque position.
Draw me like one of your French girls.
The crime scene was not well contained at all. In fact, the first people to step foot on the crime scene was the Los Angeles Herald Express. And they took several photos. Oh, yeah. They took several photos of the Black Dahlia, and they coined the name the Black Dahlia. They took pictures of a heel print that was at the scene. Tire tracks that were at the scene.
I'm sorry. Hold on. How did they get there before the police? If the police were called.
I think because it was in a pretty public area that when Betty Bessinger was like, dead body, people started like coming around, and I'm sure they found out. So I don't know. They found out somehow. Somebody made a call to the news station, probably, just like nowadays. You see somebody get into a fight in Walmart, you're calling Jack's 4 News. You know?
Yeah, but they got there first. That's
there's a theory with that too. We'll talk about that too. There's a theory with that too. So they take pictures of all of this evidence, and they're stepping all over these tire tracks and whatnot, and it's just making a big mess. However, when her autopsy is done, they determined that the young woman was Elizabeth Short, who is a 22-year-old starving actress. She did have a reputation for being a homewrecker. She did have a previous arrest. She had like underage drinking and stuff like that. But her autopsy also determined that she was killed by somebody with severe medical knowledge, because the way her body was dissected, the intestine thing, those techniques were being taught in classes still. They were like more modern techniques for the time. And so also the way that her spinal cord was severed, it was clear that somebody knew how to do that. They had been taught how to do that, or perhaps teaching other people how to do that. Now, her death was from hemorrhaging from the mutilation and lacerations done to her face. That's what they determined as her cause of death. There was also evidence that she may have been sexually abused. However, DNA samples were never, they never came out. They just came back negative.
Sorry, the lacerations on her face? So
yeah, they were.
Do you mean like the smile?
He practically, whoever did it, whoever did it to her, practically cut her face in half.
Well, that's terrible, because that was a torture method that used to be used. I don't know why I know this, but they would cut here and up, and then they would torture you, and then so when you screamed, it would completely tear. Yeah, I'm not gonna. Yeah, but that would be awful way to die if that was what
I'm
she
sure
died from.
That's what they're saying. That's what they think. Even more messed up though. Listen to this. This is so wrong. Reporters were calling.
Yeah, because the rest of it's right.
No, none of it is.
Sorry.
This is like morally wrong. Listen to this. Reporters were calling Phoebe Short, Elizabeth's mother, and lying to her, saying that Beth or Betty had won a beauty pageant, or that this was a director from Paramount Studios calling or whatnot, and they wanted to know more about Elizabeth so that they could then arrange to meet up with her. And so Phoebe would tell them all this information, and then at the end of the phone call, they'd tell her what actually happened to Elizabeth Short.
That was her mother? Oh my God.
Yeah, that's how she finds out about her daughter's death, through reporters.
They got her all excited. They were like, your daughter's going to be famous. Your daughter's so great. Just kidding. Yep. She's dead.
She's been brutally murdered on top of it.
Oh my God. Yeah, like
super messed up.
Got her all hyped, and then just gave her probably the worst news she's ever gotten, you know?
And she, it got really bad. She ends up flying out to Los Angeles to help with the crime scene investigation and stuff like that. So on January 21st, 1947, somebody claiming to be the killer contacted the Examiner newspaper and claimed that they would turn themselves in shortly, but not before sending over some souvenirs of Beth Short. On January 24th, as promised, a letter was sent via U.S. Postal Services, and it was an envelope that had been carefully cleaned with gasoline in order to get all the fingerprints off of it. The envelope contained Short's birth certificate, her business cards, her photographs, several different names and addresses. The FBI was able to pull partial prints from the packages, however, or a letter. However, they were somehow compromised in transit and got lost, and therefore it could not be analyzed or submitted as evidence.
Of course.
Of course they had.
This seems a little suspicious on the LAPD's side here.
A little bit, and that is a theory too. There's a little fishiness going on surrounding this case. One of the names led to a nightclub owner and a theater owner. The guy's name was Mark Hansen. The idea was that Hansen had tried to seduce Short, and that Short, rejected him because he was gross. And his roommate, Anne, actually thinks that he killed her from embarrassment or anger. However, he had an airtight alibi, according to the LAPD. They said that he was visiting a friend that was terminally ill. However, that would be like me being a serial killer and saying, hi guys, I was doing a live stream on Friday night at 8 p.m. However, you don't know that the clip I'm showing you right now is pre-recorded, do you? It's not, but you don't know that. So, it's that kind of idea. Oh, Dusty's covering for me. Dusty could easily say, yes, Renee is here in real live time. But I could just be a lie. It's not an airtight alibi, you know what I mean? Anyway, so the next lead led police to the University of Southern California, where they investigated several medical students. Nothing ever came of it. There are so many suspects, and lots of things do make sense when it comes into connecting them to Elizabeth Short. But there's also a lot of things that don't make sense. So this is like a giant game of, what is that? Is it it's called 50 Shades of Kevin Bacon, I think. And it's trying to name 50 people in connection to Kevin Bacon. Anyway, look it up. It's a fun game if you've never played it before. But the list is a list of considered suspects in Elizabeth Short's death are as followed. Norman Chandler, keep that name in mind for a second. Leslie Dillon, Joseph Dumas, Artie Lane, Mark Hansen, Francis E. Sweeney, Orson Welles, George Hodel, that's another one, keep in mind. Fred Sexton, George Knowlton, Robert Manley, Patrick O'Reilly, Jack Anderson Wilson. So a lot of people were considered top suspects. I want to say Norman Chandler, he was a Times editor, and a lot of people thought that they knew, actually, he had a relationship with this young girl. He knew her, and they thought that perhaps he had gotten her pregnant and killed her for that reason, and maybe that's why the news reporters had gotten there so quickly. It's just a theory. However, I want to hold on to his name for a little bit longer because I have my own theory about what happened. George Hodel is another big one that people know about.
That's quite a name. Hodel. I love that.
Hodel. No. Hodel, I think in modern times, if this was still a case that was considered open, and we could try somebody, I have no doubt in my mind that George Hodel would be accused of this, and I'll explain why. So George Hodel was accused by the LAPD soon after Dahlia's death, but was never convicted. And so later on in the years, his son, Steve Hodel, when he was adult, after he had retired from the LAPD himself, he suspected his father was the killer as well. He explains that his father, George Hodel, was a surgeon in training, and apparently his house had been wiretapped in 1949. So this is 2 years after the Dahlia's death. And he was recorded saying to another person in the room, "Spose and I did kill the Black Dahlia. They couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead." This man said that on tape. They have it. Search dogs also picked up scents of human remains on the grounds of the Hodel house, but they couldn't do anything of it. The owners that live there now didn't give them permission to dig up on the grounds, and so they really don't know what that's about and why he's smelling remains. It is reportingly that Hodel had been giving botched abortions to young ladies, and so they think that he had been killing the ladies and maybe also burying remains of anyway, so I'm going to show you this photo. Jim's going to pull up this photo for you here. There's a couple of photos. This was found in Hodel's belongings. Steve Hodel went through his father's belongings, and he pulled up a picture of this woman, an unidentified woman who looks a whole lot like Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia. And even as you scroll down to like the next two pictures, you can just compare them. If I hadn't just told you that information, you would definitely think that's the same woman. They look almost exactly alike. I will say the reason that I was like, keep Norman Chandler in mind. I think that she did have a relationship with Norman Chandler. I think that she did get pregnant by Norman Chandler. I think that she talked to her adult industry friends because she was involved in adult films. She was trying to become an actress on Hollywood, and that's how she tried to get her start. And so I think that she talked to some of her friends in that industry, and they recommended her to George Hodel. I think she had a relationship then with George Hodel, and I think something went wrong. And I think he ended up killing her and using her as a medical dummy. That's what I think happened. EVPs have been caught at Short's grave. She often sounds sad and confused, as if she doesn't realize what has happened to her. Her spirit has also been seen in the lobby and in the 10th and 11th floors of the Biltmore Hotel in Los Angeles. Many people think that this actually was the last place where she was killed, or one of the last places where she was at least seen alive. Unfortunately, Elizabeth Short was only 22 years old when she died. Her death was a horrific tragedy, just like my speech, and hopefully someday we will know what truly happened to the Black Dahlia. Any last words from you, Dusty, on this case? What do you think happened? Who killed her?
I agree with you. Yes.
Yeah, that's why. Well, we're gonna talk about our last story for the night, our local story, and in order to do that, we have to bring up a special guest. Drum roll, please.
Not the same one as last time.
Yeah, the same one as last time. Good evening, everybody. How are you? It's good to be back, as always. We're going to talk about one of the most famous stories told in St. Augustine. We're going to talk about the Opponox Tree. The cool thing about that is, until just a few days ago, I had no idea what an Opponox tree actually looked like. But here we go. They typically grow in arid countries like Somalia. but they're used to make perfumes. St. Augustine during the 1800s was a big perfume center. We thought they were going to be all kinds of things. Could someone have brought an Opponox tree to St. Augustine and had it actually growing? I've seen stranger things right here. But let's get
Me
to
too.
the
It's a good
story.
show.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Let's get to the story if we can. So in 1823, we have a new colonel that comes to the city of St. Augustine to take over the military installation here when they change the name of Castillo de San Marcos to Fort Marion. He's the highest military guy, and it's not only has his job to do, but he's also expected to show up for all of the social functions in town. At a ball given in his honor, he met the most beautiful woman that he had ever seen. And the moment he laid eyes on her, he was immediately and inconsolably infatuated with her. However, much to his dismay, he discovered that woman was already married. The evening he became acquainted with her and her husband, despite, or maybe because of this, his feelings, they hit it off and they became fast friends anyhow. When the evening came to a close, they looked forward to the next time that they would meet, but alas, it was not meant to be. In the wee hours of the very next morning, the woman became violently ill. Her husband called the doctor in, but no one seemed to be able to do a thing for her. And within a week, she was pronounced dead. Distraught, her husband turned to his newfound friend, Colonel Smith, and invited him to walk by his side in the funeral procession. Of course, the colonel agreed. It's a family custom to carry the deceased to the gravesite seated in a chair. I guess they didn't have coffins yet.
Fancy.
Yeah, like Cleopatra up on your shoulder, right?
Yeah, the Queen of England.
How odd it must have been to see this beautiful woman floating along the road above the pallbearers in an ornate chair, mourners following close behind, and with every bump in the road, her head lolls back and forth because she is no longer with us.
Do you think they had to strap her into the chair?
Like seatbelt her?
I would think so. I would think so.
Man.
She's Catholic. She's going to be buried in the Talamato Cemetery. And as they passed under the thorny branches of the Opponox tree, one of them scratched her. As it pierced her temple, a small trickle of blood slid down the side of her face. And Colonel Smith, who had not taken his eyes off of her the entire time, shouted, "Wait, she can't be dead." He had seen her eyes blink, and she was alive. The husband and the other mourners were embarrassed by Smith's sudden outburst, and despite his insistence, carried on with the burial. He continued to plead with them, "Stop, stop, she's not dead, wait a minute." They finally relented and carried her back to the house. They watched and waited in a few minutes and were shocked to see that her eyelids did actually flutter. Had it not been for Colonel Smith, the beautiful woman would have been buried alive. She thrived for another 6 years. And then, believe it or not, she again passed away. But this time, this time when the mourners are carrying the body to the cemetery in the ornate chair, Colonel Smith is not invited, number one. And number two, as they approach the Opponox tree, the procession abruptly stopped when her husband blurted out, "Whatever you do not take her too close to the Opponox tree."
Yeah, so that story, I know a lot about that story. I used to have to do some research on that story. And I remember reading that her husband had 2 other wives that died in a similar fashion, but were not scratched by the Opponox tree, and that it was kind of thought that perhaps he had tried to kill her the first time, and that when she died 6 years later, that he successfully did it the second time. So that was the whole idea of it. But George did it. Oh, okay. I think she meant for the Black Dahlia, not for the Opponox tree. It was like, yeah, we'll just blame George Hodel from now on. George Hodel.
Thanks, George Hodel.
For everybody.
George Hodel.
Yeah, Dusty, any input on the Opponox tree?
Yeah, he's definitely not getting husband of the year. I mean,
no, him.
He seemed to really want her to be dead. Like,
maybe his name was George too. It was just like the triple threat of George.
George, forget Roger. Now we have George.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Well, thank you guys for watching. Oh, go ahead.
do you suppose St. Augustine was short of lawyers back then? He couldn't just get a divorce?
Right? Like, he seemed to really want this woman dead.
What year did this happen? Divorce was illegal.
1823.
Divorce was illegal. So I only know this from the Henry Flagler story.
And all he had to do was get her pregnant.
No, you couldn't. From what I remember reading,
half of the women died giving childbirth.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, but then now he's got a baby to take care
of. True. It's a lose-lose situation.
So what?
There,
just have her supposedly dead and avoid the tree and then bury her. She wasn't dead. Now she is dead. So
I guess I don't know. The thing that's
okay, Colonel, you saved my wife the first time, but you're not invited this time because she's dead. We want. The thing that's
interesting about the story, though, is that's right during the epidemics of 1821. We first started getting yellow jack and malaria, and we're losing a lot of people. And when you put some scientific facts with it, you can see where this could happen, because a stethoscope, as much as we're used to it today, wasn't even invented until 1899. Didn't become widely used in the United States until 1903.
Right.
So doctors didn't have a way to check for a heartbeat. They would check to see if you were alive by putting a mirror under your nose and seeing if your breathing would cause the mirror to fog up a little bit, your respiration.
I keep thinking about Scary Movie where she's like shaking the body. Are you okay? Are you okay?
That's Scary Movie 3. Oh my God, Kitty, you okay?
Where who dies? Somebody dies. I think it's what's her name?
Yep.
But anyways, Cindy's like, she's not dead. She's moving. It's when she's in her casket.
Yeah,
she gets in the casket. That's what
Brenda.
happened. Kind of with Brenda. Brenda died.
Right.
But thank you guys for watching tonight. I hope
we've had a great time. Thank you.
Yes, please share this video to your friends. Force them to watch it. Tag them in it. Tell them they must see this. If they're horror fans, crime fans, or just fans of anything, really, you could fangirl over us. We appreciate it. Like our page, we do shows every Tuesday and Friday at 8 o'clock. We're going to be doing one on Tuesday again, of course. If you have any paranormal experiences you want to send in to us, go ahead and message us via a ghostly encounter, message me, message Dusty, message Jim. Have a great night, and we will see you next time on a ghostly encounter live.
Say good night, Dusty.
Good night.
Good night, Dusty.